Hey y'all, it's your girl Imani Sawari here to report on the third quarter issue. It came out in Black August, and I think you all are going to love it. Just a portion from the editor's note. This convening, hosted by the Sentencing Project, was focused on strengthening networks and building systems to support an end to felony disenfranchisement, which includes both de jure and de facto felony disenfranchisement, which you can learn on a podcast that I'll be featured on next week called Respect the Roots by Michigan Liberation, where I really break down the different types of felony disenfranchisement. Intersections with immigrant justice and global voting rights movements were also intertwined in panel discussions, which featured Rodrigo, who is an amazing community organizer in Chile. In Chile, there are currently 54 laws that have been created to establish new crimes, lengthening sentences. In the same way that we've seen new laws be created in order to disenfranchise more folks across different states, particularly in Mississippi, which I reported on just a couple months ago when there were mishaps in Mississippi and Nebraska. This is happening in other countries as well. And now that we've gotten to a point where we've recognized these tactics used by the states in order to carve out larger portions of the population being disenfranchised, it's essential that we organize in order to resist those tactics. All right, so this is my very special feature, which highlights Michelle Pearson and her amazing work. Michelle Pearson is a mother, she's a community organizer, a social justice speaker, a human rights advocate, and her membership in the campaign for fair sentencing of youth empowers her. She was served a life without the possibility of parole sentence as a minor. What ended up happening to lead to her release is that there was a new law passed by Michigan's Supreme Court that ruled that life sentences without the possibility of parole for children was unconstitutional. Now, that ruling did not impact her when it passed initially in 2012. But a few years later, folks who were given LWOP sentences, which stands for life without the possibility of parole, LWOP, LWOP, folks who were given that sentence as a minor that were currently serving that sentence as adults would be able to have their sentence convictions relooked and reassessed. And as a result of that, on August the 28th, 2018, she came home to her younger brother. As a result of coming home because of that life-changing ruling from Michigan's Supreme Court, she is now a community organizer and has deep empathy and understanding for different sentencing laws like the Good Time movement and ending juvenile life without parole movement, which is on her shirt in the feature cover photo. And she's currently working on a book, which she's just told me that she is interested in publishing through Sawari Media, so make sure to stay tuned for that, entitled Women Surviving Prison, This Is Not My Home. So she's been doing a lot of great work. She's also looking into starting her own wellness nonprofit, and through Prisonality, I am very privileged and honored to have been able to feature her and her work as a part of my work with Sawari Media through this magazine. So make sure to pick up your copy at prisonality.org, or you can view this digital copy on sawarimedia.press and sign up to receive it to your inbox. All right, so here you'll see our Wellness Quarterly section where we include different techniques and tips for transitioning and maintaining wellness and keeping a mindset of transitioning. I like to include yoga postures because while you're incarcerated, you might not have much room to do different fitness and wellness exercises, and you might not have the equipment to do all the exercises that you'd like to do. But even if you're in solitary confinement, you can do these poses. The transition tip for this issue was inspired by the words of Michelle Pearson: keep changing the world with your smile and don't let the world change your smile. This is a mantra that Michelle Pearson kept while she was incarcerated, and she made sure that in the face of any trial, challenge, or negative circumstance, that she smiled. And we all know that when you force yourself to smile, that you're actually changing your chemical imbalances from negative energy to positive energy internally, and that can also have a positive effect on your environment and the circumstances that you're facing. As you can see in the next page, we've got some photography These are from Santa Monica Pier during my time on the Roddenberry retreat earlier this year. Shout out to my Roddenberry family. So moving into poetry by Michelle Pearson, there are 2 poems in here. Get your copy so that you can check out this beautiful poetry that she wrote while she was incarcerated. And then in every single issue, what are you going to find? A feedback form. Why? Because we want to hear from our subscribers. On the next page, you'll see the End the Exception campaign. It is a national movement in order to remove the exception clause from the 13th Amendment. Colorado was the first state to remove slavery from their constitution, since Rhode Island was the only one to have done it prior to the passage of the 13th Amendment. Utah and Nebraska also abolished slavery in 2020 through a ballot initiative. And then in 2022, another handful of states also removed slavery from their constitution. Instead of really relying on individual state legislatures to do this, though we do encourage folks to continue to do that, we want to ensure that the federal government is taking the lead and really setting the standard for the fact that slavery is an unacceptable practice. Following this is a form that folks on the inside can use, as well as a photo of myself and campaign leader Bianca. We were actually at the SPAR Symposium. Including this issue, we also love to highlight submissions work that's happening with Darnell Ishmael. It's all about ensuring that students in Kenya have access to schooling. So our media actually funded several students paying their school fees and having the opportunity to go to school. You all can support his work here. And there's Darnell. So let's talk about the right to vote report this issue. We wanted to make sure that with the election coming up, readers knew exactly what their voting rights are. It really varies from state to state, which is why felony disenfranchisement campaigns are so important. Let's start with impacted voting. So all across the nation, if you are in jail pre-conviction, which includes folks who are pre-trial, as well as folks who have been charged with a felony, you have the right to vote. And in addition to that, across several states, if you are convicted for and serving only a misdemeanor, then you also have the right to vote. So let's break down what those different buckets are. The question simply, can I vote while serving a misdemeanor sentence? The states where you can't vote, it would be easier to list those. So if you're serving a misdemeanor in one of these states, then you are not eligible to vote. That includes Michigan, Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and South Carolina. Can I vote while on probation and parole? And that's a maybe. It really depends on where you live. You can vote with a misdemeanor or a felony while on probation and parole if you are living in one of the following states. And those includes California, Colorado, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Oregon, North Carolina, Nevada, Utah, Massachusetts, Michigan, Maryland, Montana, North Dakota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Washington State. So if you live in one of those states, you can vote while on probation and parole. Now, let's think a bit about absentee ballot requests. When filling out the absentee ballot application, if you are incarcerated, and whether you're incarcerated or not, your registration address should be your home address. It should be the address in the town, city, or township in which you would like to vote and be registered. However, if you are incarcerated, your mailing address should be the facility if you are sure that you will be incarcerated during the time of the election. And that's for the general or the primary election. If you think that you might not be incarcerated during the election, I would say still list the facility address as your mailing address. If you don't know that you have a family member in your household that can receive your absentee ballot, they have to be an immediate family member in most cases, and bring it to you at the jail. Because if you do happen to still be inside of the facility, then you wouldn't have access unless you do have that person that you can rely on. Thing is, if you do have the mailing address as your facility and you happen to be released before the election, then you can just go to your local clerk or township clerk and ask for your ballot in person. And then the absentee ballot that was sent to the jail will be spoiled, and you can just vote in person at your clerk's office. So now that we've gone over impacted voting and all of the different restrictions around felony and disenfranchisement across all of the states, we can talk about the different pieces that I'm reporting on today. And in Maryland, House Bill 627 passed the state house, thankfully, with overwhelming support. However, unfortunately, it failed to pass the state Senate. And so it originated in the House side and passed on the House side, was moved over to the Senate side in order to be discussed, and the Senate did not pass it in time. This bill would have guaranteed access to voter registration for all the just impacted residents by enabling automatic voter registration policies to include the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Now, I'm encouraging residents of Maryland who are able to write letters of support to their state Senate of Education where the bill was housed, or just directly to your state senator and ask them what their thoughts are or were on House Bill 627 and let them know why that bill is important to you. I've also included the address of that committee for incarcerated folks who do not have internet access and wouldn't be able to know the address to write otherwise. All right, in Mississippi, the Senate unfortunately dropped the ball on House Bill 1609. However, it did pass with a vote 99-9 in favor on the House side. So it looks like Maryland and Mississippi are having the exact same problem when it comes to the House being in overwhelming support of expanding voter access for just and impacted folks, and the Senate just being either unwilling or unorganized when it comes to carrying the torch across the finish line. So I'm also encouraging Mississippi residents to write letters of support to the Judiciary Division B Committee, particularly to Juan Barnett, and his address is included there. You could also, if you have access to looking up your Mississippi State Senator, look them up and write them directly. Let them know why this bill would be important to you. Automatically restoring voting rights upon release is something that happened in Michigan, and it's been beneficial for folks. And in Nebraska, we talked about legislation 20L20, which would restore voting rights upon the completion of sentence. But it would allow Nebraska to be in the same pool of the states that I just mentioned earlier, where folks would be able to vote while on probation and parole instead of having to wait. And the reason why it's so important for folks to at least have an understanding that as soon as they're released, they can vote is because if you are deemed safe enough, if you're deemed worthy of entering society, working, paying taxes, furthering your education within society, being amongst other citizens and participating in citizenship in so many other ways, again, paying taxes, then you should be worthy to go to the ballot box and cast your vote. You're being impacted by the laws intimately, and so you should have a voice. And so Nebraska, for some reason, is being negligent in doing that, even though the legislature has already said, we want to be on the right side of history. We want to step up into the tier of those states that have made it clear that once you're out, you can vote. For some reason, Attorney General Mike Hilgers issued an opinion disputing what the legislator has already decided on. The House, the Senate, the governor has already decided, yes, these 7,000 Nebraskans who were disenfranchised can now vote. They can now participate in the election. And due to that dispute, the Secretary of State is unwilling to process registrations from the Nebraskans with felonies. So now, this issue for all the states where the Prisonality Magazine is distributed, we've included not only the senator, but also the address of where to write the senator at their DC office and the name of the committee or committees in which legislation that impacts them on the criminal legal system level would be housed. And so there's several pages across several states that we've included. And finally, we have covered over 150 state and federal proposals for our incarcerated readers to learn from and be equipped with when they write their representatives. We've also sent hundreds of letters from people in prison to lawmakers on both the state and the federal level, and we've hosted nearly a dozen statewide and national campaigns. Thank you to Worth Rises for funding of this issue. Our funders also includes People Media and the Black Voters Matter Fund. Learn more about the work of Prisonality Magazine by visiting us at prisonality.org, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next Prisonality recap.